Well, the announcement of the air defense identification zone has drawn criticism from Japan and the United States. Well, to get the reaction from here in Beijing, we have our reporter Han Bin here in the studio. You were there at that press conference from the Defense Ministry, and of course the headlines are this incredible global reaction to this ID zone. Tell us what's been the military argument in addressing that criticism.
Well, both the Chinese government and military have stated that criticisms are a product of overreaction and double standards. More than 20 countries, including the United States and Japan, have set up their own air defense identification zones decades ago. So why not China? The U.S. was among the first to do so in 1950, and Japan set up an air identification zone in the 1960s. And at today's press conference, the military said that if Japan wanted China to cancel the zone, then Japan would have to cancel this air zone first, and China can reconsider this issue after 44 years. Japan has been using its identification zone strategy to keep tracking of the Chinese airplanes and hinder PLA maritime exercises. It has also staged more military drills and increased its military budget. So many Chinese analysts believe that by setting an air identification zone, China can better protect its security sovereignty.
Well, let's look at another part of this story in the way the zone gives the opportunity and the platform to the PLA to become more involved in defending its waters. How has the army adapted to defending against any potential threats?
Well, if you look back, you will find that the People's Liberation Army is undergoing deep transformations. For decades, China's defense policy has been focusing on land forces and coastal defense. However, with the water disputes brewing, the PLA has now strengthened itself to its naval capabilities and defends its national interests on the sea. The army has shifted on high-tech weaponry rather than sheer manpower. And the new policies from the CPC's recent meeting says the forces will undergo a big structural change by setting up joint operational commands, and above all, to improve the overall coordination among the different forces so as to better meet the challenges ahead. Back to you.
Thanks very much. Well, let's continue with this story here, because China has urged Japan and the United States to end accusations against that new air defense identification zone. The Foreign Ministry in Beijing on Thursday responded to new reports that Tokyo will continue to intensify surveillance of the area.
China has reiterated its stance on the air defense identification zone in the East China Sea. The accusations from Japan and the U.S. are groundless. China has expressed strong dissatisfaction and lodged solemn protest to Japan and the U.S. We also urge both countries to reflect on their own behaviors and errors, to stop groundless accusations and any provocative actions that could lead to instability in the region.
Well, in the latest, Japanese military planes have defied that new air defense identification zone and flown into it without informing China. The Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga says the aircraft which flew into the zone on Thursday were carrying out routine surveillance missions. It comes a day after a pair of US B-52 bombers entered the zone without submitting flight plans to China in advance. The US also says it was merely carrying out planned exercises. Well, China has rejected South Korean demands to rectify its new air defense identification zone over the East China Sea. The deputy chief of the PLA, Wang Guanzhong, and South Korea's Vice Defense Minister, Baek Sung-ju, held a defense strategy dialogue on Thursday. In those talks, the South Koreans called on China to change the rules surrounding the new air defense zone, a request which was rejected by China. The new air defense zone requires aircraft to report their flight plans to China, to maintain radio contact, to reply promptly to identification inquiries, and to bear clear markings of both nationality and registration. U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel spoken on the phone with Japan's Defense Minister Itsunori Onodera. Hagel reiterated that the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty also applies to the Diaoyu Islands. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department says the Deputy Secretary of State William Burns has already discussed the issue with Chinese officials.
The Chinese Defense Ministry responds on Wednesday that China monitored the flights of U.S. B-52 over its newly created air defense identification zone. Any kind of update on that?
On that, I know they've spoken publicly about it as well and conveyed that this has been a military exercise that they had planned, but I would point you to them for any more specific comment.
But as we know that from 1970s, we know that Japan has extended its air defense identification zone several times. And there is a report that Japan extends ADIZ into Taiwan space. Does the U.S. government worry about this issue? Are you going to communicate with Japan regarding this?
I don't have anything more for you on that, unfortunately.
I'm just wondering, what have our conversations with the Chinese been like about ADIZ?
Again, I mean, I would point you to DOD on specifics on that. If there's more to share, I'm happy to share it.
Now, it's the word over in Washington. Let's take a look now at the Chinese media reaction to the two US B-52s that flew into that new zone over the East China Sea on Wednesday. Let's go first to the People's Daily, where experts say the move from the US serve four purposes. They say to test the Chinese reaction, to show off its power to its allies, to reassert its role in the Asia-Pacific region, and to prevent Chinese countermeasures to its patrols in the area. On its own end, the Beijing Times says that the United States had demonstrated its double standards. It criticized Washington and its political allies for saying that its own air defense zones are for peaceful purposes, while another country's could lead to an unpredictable outcome. The Global Times says Washington has sent a negative signal to its allies, which will only impact stability in the region and escalate tensions. The South China Morning Post in Hong Kong cites a global expert at the Hong Kong University who says it will be a process of probing and testing from both sides. Eventually, China and the US will come to a tacit understanding, going on to say that China will never abolish a zone as it has the legal grounds to have it, and that other countries will have to accept that as a political reality.